Well, hey, we're back with another episode of the Freedom in Business Show. I'm so glad you're still here with us. And let's dive in. Today's topic is incredible, and I'm so excited to just jump right in. But let me first introduce you to our guest. Jenn Espinosa-Goswami is a professional speaker and holistic confidence coach at Weightless LLC. As a former Toastmasters International officer and graduate of the Masters of Leadership program at Augsburg University, Jenn helps women show up confidently in their personal and professional lives through her signature confidence on camera training. Her transformational health story has been featured in many magazines all over, and I'm excited to hear about her and let her share her story with you. Thank you so much for being here, Jenn. I'm so incredibly excited to jump into this topic because you're going to be talking about public speaking, and that is the thing that everyone dreads.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. And I have to say that public speaking is actually better than death. So if you've heard that statistic, it's okay. It's actually better than being dead. So we'll get into that a little bit later.
Right. Well, the focus of this show is to talk about multiple streams of income and how different entrepreneurs interpret that, how they incorporate that into their business so that they can hit those goals and hit that elusive freedom, true freedom, time freedom that everybody desires. And that's like why we go into our own business, is so that we can control our calendar, we can control our lives, and it can be a lot of work getting there. So first, I'd love to just ask you, how did you get started? What was the first business that you opened, and how did that go? What did it look like for you that very first time?
Well, thank you for asking. Like many people, I stumbled upon my business. I never intended to be an entrepreneur. My path was kind of going down the corporate route. I spent 16 years in financial services, doing various quality assurance jobs. I did a lot of fraud investigations, which isn't nearly as sexy as it sounds when you're like, oh, she worked with the CIA and the FBI. Yes, but it was kind of boring because a lot of the work I did on a day-to-day was data management. So I was massaging data on my computer all day long, and there was very little human interaction. So that's when I discovered Toastmasters, and it was a personal development as part of my annual review at my job at the time. I joined Toastmasters, which is an international public speaking organization, and I just had a blast. It was so fun. I got to be creative. I got to talk to people. I got to experience feedback, which if you're not used to getting feedback, it's a little bit nerve-wracking at first, but then you're like, oh, I'm getting overwhelmingly positive feedback more than I'm getting negative feedback. So it really kind of filled my cup in a way that my corporate job did not do. So when my corporate job laid me off, as they do in the mortgage industry on a cyclical basis, and some people may be experiencing this right now, I just got tired of trying to do the rat race of the 9-to-5 cubicle kind of life. And I said, okay, well, what about this public speaking thing? Because I know there are professional speakers out there.
Right.
Let's get started. So that's how Weightless was born, as a professional speaking company.
Awesome. That's amazing. I love the transition and just that decision that you made. It's like, you know what? I'm just going to totally turn things around. I'm not going to just go try to find that same job that I had before at another company. Let's just do something different.
Yeah. I mean, it was very exciting, very nerve-wracking because I don't have any entrepreneurial people in my life. So I had no idea what to expect. And I had 2 children at the time. They're still here, but they're older now.
Right.
And one of them was quite young when I started. So I'm like, okay, so I'm a young mom, I've got a young kid at home. I'm transitioning out of 9-to-5, which I had some identity crisis with that, because I'm just like, oh, corporate treats you differently than the online world treats you.
Right.
But public speaking was kind of the right choice for me. And again, that's how I opened my business. But it's kind of funny because some of the messages I was sharing as a speaker had to do with my personal weight loss transformation. For those of you who aren't familiar, I lost 100 pounds about 20 years ago. And it was something I didn't talk about a lot until Toastmasters introduced me to, oh, you got to come up with a speech about something. And I'm like,
right.
What should I talk about? So I talked about my weight loss. And that was at the beginning stages of my public speaking business as well, because a lot of people wanted to know, how did you lose the weight? What did you do? How can I do those things too? So that's what I started speaking on. I offered lunch and learn type seminars for different companies and corporations. And I delivered that as a workshop to different companies and was getting paid to do so, which is really fun. And then eventually I started adding coaching to my business because my audiences would be so touched by what they heard in my 45-minute presentation that they wanted to make positive changes in their own life. So that introduced me to the idea of coaching, which is my second source of income.
I love that. So you've incorporated life experience, also, the corporate background, just from the aspect of knowing what corporations need and how they like to serve their employees and engage them. They love doing those lunch and learns and being able to introduce them to new concepts and things. And then did you do some specific public speaking training outside of Toastmasters or business training as well? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I did. So I do have a master's degree in leadership, which didn't help me necessarily with public speaking, aside from the fact that I had to present a paper each and every class. So, I was quite comfortable with presenting by that point. That was my educational background in presenting. But when I took the leap to create my own company, I was fortunate to have a mentor here in Minneapolis, which is where I live. And she had a company called Speaker Biz Institute. And she's a formal National Speakers Association student member. She's still a member of the National Speakers Association. And she started offering this one-off course because one of the challenges she saw in the speaking industry was when you join NSA, you have to pay membership fees and things like that. But basically, you kind of absorb what the teachers who are practiced and professional speakers, you absorb their information, but they don't necessarily help you build the business of speaking because that's totally different. Right. So this woman who mentored me, her name is Vitalia, she actually walked me through the foundational pieces of the business of speaking, including contracts, invoicing, pre-event surveys, and just different information that I wouldn't think to ask for as a new speaker.
That's awesome. I think that is the piece that I know is missing, and I'm taking some training on that too, on how do you actually get not just speaking gigs, but paid speaking gigs. How do you go about that? What do you need to do to structure it? And I love that you've incorporated actually paid speaking in, because I know a lot of us in the business world, we can put speaker as as a thing that we do, as one of those titles, right? That we do, but usually it is more not informal, but unpaid. So it's more marketing purposes than it is your actual job, your part of your actual business.
And I'm actually surprised, Stephanie, how many people out there are killing it as speakers. I mean, they're wonderful. The audiences love them. They're building their email list or their platforms on social media, becoming influencers, but they're not getting the dollars for it. And I'm like, but you're so good at this. Why did you ever ask whether there's a budget for speaking? Did you start quoting fees when people approach you and invite you? And that's a thing that a lot of business owners that I've run across, they don't think about it, or they're like, I don't know where to start.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about that decision that you made as you were speaking and then hearing the audience feedback that they wanted more. Can you go a little bit more in detail in making that decision to add coaching, and what did you do to then develop that aspect of your business more?
Yeah, well, first of all, I do want to say that a lot of people think that speakers are these super extroverted, flashy showmen who are like, me, it's the me show. But what I'd like to offer, especially for the coaches who are listening, is speaking is actually the flip side of coaching. As a coach, your superpowers, or one of them, is listening. So the opposite of listening is talking. So speakers who are really good at what they do, they often tend to be coaches or people who are very good at listening and observing what their audience needs. They are really tuned into what the needs are in the room. And coaching for me was something I always had an interest in coaching. I just didn't know how to go about doing it. So similar to speaking. And so when people would ask me, oh, how do I coach with you? To be honest, I had some imposter syndrome show up for me in the beginning because I don't have a medical background. And so usually when you think of health coaching, you think, oh, it's a registered dietitian, they're an RN, they have some sort of medical basis for what they're doing. I had none of that. And I had no interest in getting a certificate that told me that I could do that. So how I approached it instead was I looked at holistic coaching. And holistic coaching is less of a philosophy and more of a code of ethics, if you will. So that everything in our lives is impacted, like we have different areas of our lives. And a really good holistic coach would understand that, you know, maybe you struggle with overeating, but maybe there's something in your spiritual side or something in your career side that is causing that to get out of whack for you.
Yeah.
So what worked for me was I told people, I can't do a specific dietary meal plan for you based on what medical challenges you have. I'm not going to ask you for your medical history, but I will, as a coach, dive deep into your dietary habits from the standpoint of what do you typically do? And this is something I brought from my corporate world. What are your patterns and trends? And we don't often think of ourselves in that way, right? We're like, oh, sometimes I do this, sometimes I do that. If I'm inspired, I'll do this. But we all follow certain patterns and trends in our own lives. And this is true not just personally, but also professionally. Maybe every 3 years you take a new job, or every so often, like every fall, you get energized. We do have patterns and trends. So I followed a 4-step process to help people set the right goals, which I call milestones. And eventually, you know, in the beginning of coaching, I was just talking about this 4-step process, which was my own process, and teaching people on the goal achievement side of weight loss, health coaching, all of those things. So I was less married to what you eat and how you move. And instead, I was in a relationship with my coaching clients as to what would make the most sense for them. Because I have a lot of coaching clients who are not cookie cutter. Here's the prescription or the plan, you just follow it and leave me alone because it's all out there for you. I don't do done for you kinds of things. I do very specific, very custom programs. And so that didn't really fit with any of the different health coaching certifications out there, because once you get a certification in a certain philosophy, they usually want you to follow that same one forever and ever. And that wasn't a fit for me.
So tell me a little bit about what a typical day looks like for you, or week, between speaking engagements and coaching your clients, preparing for those things, you know, the whole back end. I don't know if you have a team behind you that helps you in, you know, VA support or anything like that, but what does a typical day or a typical week look like for you?
Yeah, well, I don't have a team. I'm a solopreneur, and I have no intention of licensing or creating a team or train the trainer. I have no interest in any of those things. I'm a solopreneur. This business stays with me. And my day-to-day, so speaking serves 2 purposes for me. And I help other coaches figure this out in their business as well. I stepped away from health coaching this past year, and I started doing public speaking training and coaching. So the holistic confidence coach means that I help you become confident to step up and speak up within your business so that you can earn the money, get your time freedom, and things of that nature. Can you repeat the question?
Just wondering what your typical day looks like, or your typical week. I think sometimes our day-to-day is kind of hard, because usually as a coach and doing all these things, like every day looks a little bit different. So even just thinking it from a weekly standpoint, what happens in a week for you? How do you balance the 2 aspects of your business?
Yeah, so I'm very intentional about my time. I only work when my children are in school, in some occasional evening hours during the weekdays. I don't work on weekends. Maybe occasionally I'll launch a program that happens for 1 hour over a Saturday, but I don't work during family time. So I block out my calendar for family time and family commitments. And my husband works full time, so I'm primarily the one who picks up kids from school, takes them back, all those sorts of things, all the activities. In terms of how much speaking I do versus how much coaching I'm doing, I do more speaking than coaching right now. And there's a reason for that. First of all, I get paid to speak. So I probably get paid more for a single speech than not for all my coaching programs. But depending on how long people coach with me, they may not be paying as much as I do for a single speaking opportunity that takes me an hour long. So I lead with speaking first. And typically what happens when I speak, I'll have so many people want to connect with me and learn more about coaching. So to me, it makes sense to start with the speaking and then to go to coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And currently I speak about 3 to 5 times a month, and that includes podcast interviews, summits, online events. I have a contract with a local company here in the Twin Cities to do wellness seminars. They book me a couple times a month. So I have some regular, consistent gigs that come in. And as well, I'm also prospecting for new speaking gigs, which can be anywhere from 6 months from now to 2 years from now, depending on what the opportunity is.
Oh, wow.
And then from there, I have certain days of the week that are coaching days. And that's where I dedicate my time to discovery calls, to connect with people and chat with them. I devote my time to coaching them. I have programs where I require people to work with me at least 3 months, private coaching. But because it's a private coaching model, I can enroll someone at any time. So I'm not like constantly launching. I'm not feeling the frustration that could happen with launching. I do have other monthly programs that I offer or one-off services, but for the most part, I work Monday through Friday between the hours of 9 and 2 Central Time, and occasional Saturdays.
I think that's great, and that's the essence of that time freedom, that success. You get to set your hours and what works for you, for your family. I have a similar schedule most of the time. There are times like when I'm creating an event like this that hours are like way crazy and out of that. But typically I try to keep my business in between those school hours as well, and have very few meetings after I've picked my daughter up from school. Now she's in high school. Soon she'll be driving herself to school, and I'll get 2 hours more in my day.
How exciting! Yeah, my oldest daughter's in college, so I'm like, she doesn't need me around most of the time.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to talk a little bit more about your expertise in speaking. And so thinking through your business, through what you've done, what you've learned, you're able to help people break out, right? So a lot of us as entrepreneurs, we get into the business, we start setting up some of the background things, our website and things like that. And then it hits us and we have this deer in the headlights kind of look that happens when we realize, I got to talk to people. To grow this business, I got to talk to people. Like, I need to be on social media. I need to be doing things there. I need to have enrollment conversations with people. I need to get in front of local, chamber, or, like you said, like whether it's Toastmasters or chamber or like BNI,
Rotary is another one.
Rotary, like those types of things, to network and to get known. And depending on your business model, it might be more on the internet side, more web-based stuff. I know that's for me. I'm not looking for, like most of my clients, I'm looking for people who we can do this remotely, right?
Yes.
But if it's more of an in-person, fitness training and things like that, you still need to be able to get out there, get in-person network. And part of that in most of those types of organizations is that at some point you're going to get up and you're going to speak and you're going to share what you do and how you help people and a little bit of your story. Like, why is it that you do what you do? So when people realize that, they actually have to get up in front of people and talk. Like, it's important to know what you're going to say. It's important to know how to structure it. So tell us, how is that? Like, when you think of speaking for your business, as you're building your business, how do you start?
Well, that's a great question. I think what most people think that they have to do, and I've done this myself thousands of times, is come up with your elevator speech, because often when we're first in the scene in our business, we're doing a lot of networking. We're attending different events, we're meeting people, maybe BNI, whatever it looks like near to where you are. So we practice the 60-second elevator speech, right? I help X people do Y without, or so they can Z. Like, that's the formula, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the same as speaking. That's introducing yourself. And that has nothing to do with speaking. As a speaker, you give people a bio and an introduction so they introduce you. So the work of speaking is not in who you are or who you serve. That's kind of the appetizer. And that's usually handled by someone else who's introducing you and giving you the opportunity to be on a platform that they are bringing their people to. The business of being a speaker is you are up there to share stories that allow your audience to see the transformation they can experience as a result of spending that time with you. So that's a big mission, right? I mean, that's pretty huge. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, you have to know what to say. And I know a lot of people struggle with the, what do I say? And I usually work with people one-on-one with this because it's a very important thing to nail down within your business. So we call that a signature speech. And when you have your first and maybe your only signature speech, and it can be anywhere from 15 minutes to 90 minutes, that's typically what you would see for a signature speech. That gives an overview, like a bird's eye vision of where you go with your services. So most of us are out there helping people do something that they don't know how to do. So we're not telling people how to do it as a speaker. We're showing them the why. Why are you doing this important work in the world? And we also share with them what. What is the method through which you can allow this to happen for your audience members? So it's a very intuitive process, and some of it is an art. Like you have to practice to get to the point where you're like, I can just flow with whatever I'm feeling for my audience, whether it's live or virtual. I can engage actively in the chat or in the comments or in the live stream. That takes time to get to there. But the best place to start is always to know exactly what to say in your signature speech. And it should always be the same one. And it's basically your business mission in a beautifully wrapped box. It doesn't have to be memorized. I call myself the unscripted speaker, because when you memorize what you're going to say, you lose the opportunity and the potential to connect with your audience. When you're like, oh, I got to think about this, I got to think about that, you're going to lose your audience. So the more practiced and aware you are of how to deliver that speech to blow everyone away, the more you can engage them on a different level and not have to worry about the exact wording you're using because you're so comfortable delivering it time after time.
Can you address those, you mentioned it a little bit early on, those extroverted people and the introverted people, and how they can both be successful when they step in front of that mic?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we live in a great land of opportunity right now. There are many virtual speaking engagements. So you're not actually going to be stepping onto a stage in front of thousands of people with a big, TV screen and you up in lights. You don't have to worry about that level of speaking. Maybe someday you want to get there. You're totally my people. But if you don't want to get there, it's okay. You can still use virtual speaking the same way as you would use anything else. But speaking has the benefit of allowing you to receive the right audience, a bigger impact, and a greater reach. I know I spent hours and hours every month at the beginning of my business showing up to lunches and dinners for networking where they hired speakers to come in and share education with us. And eventually I'm like, oh, I should be up there because we were listening to this person. They were educating us. They were telling us how to do something. Instead, I was wasting my time spending money on food and listening to someone else tell me how to build my business. That's not effective networking. But it took me a long time to get there. And I think a lot of introverts, especially when they first start their business, they're like, I have to network. But being the lovely introverted people they are, they don't necessarily want to be the loudest person in the room or put themselves out there. The good news is online marketing and video content is created for introverts because it's you and a camera.
Yeah.
As long as you're comfortable with yourself and you're intentional about what you're saying when you turn your camera on and press record, you have an ability to reach not just one person or 10 people. Depending on how you share that in your platform as you grow, you can share it with hundreds of thousands, even 10 years from now, because it's a video that will never go away, as opposed to a live event. When people exit the room, did they remember that event? Maybe. I sometimes have people come up to me 3 years later after they saw me at an event. But virtually, you can create a video that, for better or worse, never goes away unless you take it down.
Right. So what are 3 ways that speaking can really build your client base?
Well, first of all, when we talk about time freedom, how long does it take you to connect with a single individual who may purchase from you? Well, it depends, right? You do the back and forth with the email chain, and what's a good time for you, and what's a good time for you, and the holidays are coming up, I can't do that, I can't do this. And compare that with speaking, where you are invited to someone's audience, you stand up for 45 minutes, 60 minutes, you deliver amazing value, and maybe you end with some networking with the people who just listen to you and have questions and things like that. So compare that 60 minutes there versus the maybe 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months to keep following up with a single individual. I mean, there's no comparison there. Your reach is just that much better, and it's so time efficient.
What are some key pieces that need to be in your talk, in that signature speech that you create? What's the structure look like?
Ooh, I love that you asked this question. First of all, I have a checklist called Structure Your Speech for Success Checklist. And this is for any type of presentation you want to do. So if you do webinars that you record and send out afterwards, you're creating courses, you're doing live streams, it applies to any type of speaking you want to do. So you need to get that because it'll help you with the vision of what makes it successful for you and your business, what that could look like. But it also has 8 different points that are really important for you to nail whenever you're speaking. And this is the difference between the free speakers that we talked about earlier. I have no shade on free speakers. Like, you're out there doing your thing, you're making an impact, whether or not you're trying to sell anything. But that doesn't mean that you are primed in such a way to grow your business. So when it comes to what you need to have when you speak, the format would be something along the lines of your introduction, and you don't introduce yourself. Please don't introduce yourselves, people. Like, if you can get someone else to introduce you, please make sure they do that. They have your bio, it's all ready to go. They know what to say. They know how to pronounce your name. That's super important. You should not introduce yourself as a speaker. But then you introduce your topic. Like, we've already had your intro by someone else who invited you there. You introduce your topic. Then you give them the roadmap. And the roadmap is the 3 points you're going to talk about within your talk. If it's less than 30 minutes, maybe 2 points. We don't want to overwhelm people with information. When people are overwhelmed, they don't buy.
Right.
So be aware of that. And less is more when it comes to speaking. And then you'll make sure that you seed, we call it seed. So you introduce the idea of how you work with people. It's not in the last 5 minutes of your presentation. You should be introducing that from the first 10 minutes of your presentation of how you work with people. So that could be through case studies. It could be through examples. It could be through mentioning a program that you use, such as Confident on Camera. You seed that throughout your presentation. You go through each of your 3 points, and each point has a story. Now, here's the unscripted part of it. And this is what I help people with all the time. You don't have to use the same 3 stories every time you speak. In fact, that's what makes you a better speaker. You start refining and honing it so you understand which stories are really resonating with your audience. If you're really doing a good job, you're customizing your presentation to your audience. So for example, maybe you might speak to coaches in one time, and then another time you're speaking to dental professionals. Well, the stories you might use between those 2 audiences are quite different. Like, maybe you have a funny dentist story you want to share with your dental professionals, but maybe you have a coaching related story that makes more sense for the other audience. The ability to swap out your stories is going to be really important for you as you're growing within your speaking technique. And then you go through a transition point in your presentation. The transition can be just an acknowledgement of where your audience is with you. It can be a check-in with them. It could be a tell me what you reflected on right now, what really stood out for you. This is an opportunity for you to check in with your audience and just understand what they received from what you shared. I can tell you, I have audiences that have cried, and I had no idea that they, like, I wasn't intending for them to cry. And they start crying, and I'm like, I don't really know how to deal with this. So that gives you a moment as a speaker as well to compose yourself, because you're like, what if they're reacting differently than what I thought they would react? And it happens. That's okay. And that's when you have your call to action. So typically there's a mood you want to have in your presentation. The mood will be highly dependent on your business and on the services you provide. So for example, one of my clients is in burnout coaching. She helps people, get out of burnout and recover from burnout. She works with a lot of healthcare workers. Well, her mood is not going to be like super happy and jumpy and all those things, because she's talking about her burnout story and how she almost died from it. That's not something where she's going to be super joyful. But in the transition stage of her presentation, when I worked with her, she had to lift the mood from the I almost died to, and now here's where we're going to go so you don't go through that. So she's changing the transition there and the feeling that her audience is going to receive. You don't want your audience to be crying at the end of your presentation or feeling sad or lost. It's really important. And then finally, you do a recap of everything of your roadmap. This is what we talked about today. In speaking, you tell them what you're going to say. You tell them what you have to say, and then you tell them what you just said. It's just part of the repetition. And then, of course, there's an invitation for how people can connect with you. That's the overall structure of a presentation.
Beautiful. And the flow seems easy. I'm sure it's not as easy pulling some of that stuff together so that you create it, but the flow does seem very easy and repeatable. So that, like, I remember, like you said, with switching out some of the stories that you may tell, if the structure is the same, and knowing when to switch that out. So how do you know? I mean, obviously, when you accept a speaking gig, you're going to ask some important questions about the audience, right? To know then how do you customize your signature talk so like the meat of it's the same, right?
Right.
But you're going to customize it to the audience. So how do you usually go about getting the information that you need so that you can customize it?
Yeah, that's a really great question. First of all, I do the same presentation for pretty much everyone I talk to, which is the purpose of a signature speech, because you want it to be something that any audience can benefit from. So that's where you go general. But when you're customizing it for a specific audience, it depends on how you're applying for that opportunity. So some places require you to submit an application. And those places that require an application, they're very specific on their guidelines. You might have to read through a whole page worth of, you can do this, there's no selling, you can't do that. So being very aware and doing your research. If it's an event that happens every year, take a look at who the previous speakers were. Take a look at some of the titles that were being submitted and some of the comments and feedback that people might have used as testimonials. Like, do your research ahead of time and understand what that event is, who it's for, and what really resonated with previous audiences. And this is something you can have in a conversation with an event organizer as well. I'm just saying for some of the bigger conferences, that information is all published on the website. So look at the previous year to understand what's happening there. Now, if you're in a conversation with someone, maybe they're inviting you to their membership group to do a guest expert spot. This is where you can be really intentional about, okay, well, who is it you serve, and just understanding who's going to show up. Asking about the numbers, like how many people can we expect to show up? Sometimes there's expectations of collaboration, like you have to promote it so many times to your people and I'll promote it so many times to my people. Sometimes you can have conversations about how you split the profits, if there are any profits, or if there's an affiliate commission. Those things are all possible as well. I love affiliate summits, by the way. They're great. You speak once and you get paid for 6 months. It's fabulous. That's a great thing. But yeah, it depends on how you're applying for the opportunities, but they already know what your signature talk is. And hopefully they've heard you speak before with that same signature talk, because that's going to be the best referral for you. They're going to say, oh my God, my friend here told me about you presenting this talk, And then maybe you tweak the title just a little bit. Maybe you tweak
Mm-hmm.
the learning objectives just a little bit. Sometimes I'll add additional learning objectives depending on what audience it's for. And sometimes in the past, like I've done presentations live for a corporate audience, but sometimes then I'll have a different company that's a royalty-based platform where they just want to pop the video there. They might give me fewer minutes to complete the workshop. They might have different technical requirements. So just being mindful that anytime you show up, you can certainly tweak things, but the meat and potatoes should always be the same.
Well, this has been amazing, and I like the aspect that, you know, as a fellow introvert, I have learned to love speaking, and now, you know, like I love speaking in front of audiences. I love speaking in groups, you know, online. I love doing video. I learned, like, I can't say I hate. I don't like to blog, like write out a blog post, turn on the camera, open my mouth, and I will say something. And
It's so easy.
and then I can transcribe it and make it a blog post. But
repurpose. I love repurposing.
yes, exactly. Yes. But I have learned that, like, I love to speak. And now, and I'll say this, as far as my energy and knowing that I'm going to show up with a certain amount of energy on stage, I know that I also need to prepare before and after to have downtime where it's like completely silent, so that I can maintain that energy. And then, like, you know, so I used to speak. We had a business networking lunch that we did, and I spoke several times at that event, and it was on Thursdays. And so I knew, like, Thursday afternoon, once that lunch was over, there needed to be nothing on my calendar, because this brain needed to just turn off, veg, do whatever, like, because I was extroverted for an hour, right?
It takes a lot of energy, right? And way to take care of yourself and to recognize that.
Now I can handle it a whole lot better, but that has come with practice and learning and knowing, and like, and just getting more comfortable on stage. But yeah, those early days, yeah, I required a lot more recovery.
And that's another thing I want to point out. A lot of events right now are virtual. Some of them are hybrid, but we will be returning to live events. And so if you're an introvert and you're like, oh my God, I'm so scared at the idea of going to a 3-day conference and I've got to have my energy up the entire time, here's what I'll say to that. If you're a chosen speaker for a conference, often you'll get a ticket to attend the conference. It's totally up to you as a business owner and a leader to decide not to show up for any of that except your time and or anything that piques your interest. Of course, you should hobnob with the people who brought you on to the conference. And that can look like a lot of different things. Maybe you have lunch with them. Maybe the night before you do a VIP dinner with them. You know, that can look different, but don't feel like you need to be there for, you know, from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Protect your energy, because that makes you a better speaker.
Yeah, that's so important, because I know just being at a conference can wear you out and you're just sitting there listening the whole time. And so, yes, I love that advice. So you mentioned earlier that you do have your structure your speech checklist.
Yes.
So you told us a little bit about that. The link to that is here on this page. Make sure you grab that, because it is something that you're going to be able to use when you're podcast guesting, which I recommend all my clients do that. That when you're creating your own videos and things, it's a great way to help you generate content for your own group, for your own channel, for your, you know, just as an introduction of who you are and be able to tell your story and your expertise. So definitely grab that. It's free. It's here on this page. Go get it now. And I want to see your speeches. Like, tag us. Like, when you start, when you create something, like, go introduce yourself on your Facebook page and use this structure to tell a story and share it with us. We want to know. We want to see. We want to celebrate with you that you've done it, for one. I love celebrating that. But I want to see what you come up with. I want to see what are the stories that you decide to tell that will help engage your audience in in you, and really help them connect with you.
Yeah, I'd be
Thank you.
excited to see that too. Make sure to tag me. I'm at Jenn Spingo, or this QR code behind me. It's a functional code. So if you take a picture of it, we can connect and I can give you some feedback on what you do put out
Awesome.
into the world, because I care that you're putting your mission out into the world. That's what I hope people do.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Jenn. This has been amazing. This has been so much information around speaking, and really great steps on how to formulate that signature talk and the importance of it. And I think it is something that more of us as entrepreneurs need to be looking into, not just from the aspect of podcasts and things, but actually paid speaking gigs.
It's a brave new world out there, and it's the best way to experience that freedom in business. That's the whole purpose of this event. So thank you so much, Stephanie.